Welcome to Election 2018, the Democratic primary in New Mexico's 2nd Congressional District. I'm Fred Martino. We welcome the candidates David Baake and Mad Hildebrandt. Welcome to you both.
Thank you so much, Fred.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here today. Questions for tonight's forum were sent to us by viewers via our feedback@nmsu.edu email address. Thanks for those submissions. The candidates will have 90 seconds to answer each question, and we begin with David Baake. David, this is a very general question to begin with, and we often do that at the beginning of these forums. Why do you think that you should win the Democratic primary?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Fred, for organizing this, and thank you so much, Matt, for joining me in this conversation. I really appreciate the question. I think that what I bring to this race that's unique is that I have the energy, experience, and enthusiasm to fight for New Mexico. I've worked tirelessly throughout my life to obtain a world-class education. I graduated from Harvard Law School, and then I went on to work and doing work that shaped policy at the highest levels of government. I met with members of the Obama White House to help craft the policies that allowed us to lead the world at the Paris climate negotiations. I litigated before the DC Circuit, the second most powerful court in our nation. I worked with members of Congress to draft a statement on the need to reduce pollution from aircraft. I worked in the federal judiciary where I helped decide major civil rights cases and helped disabled Americans cut through the red tape and bureaucracy to obtain the benefits that they'd earned. So I think I really know how the system works, and I know how too often it doesn't work. Too often politicians rig the system in favor of the wealthy and powerful. And we need a new voice in Washington, someone who knows how to fix the system and who can go in there on day one and say, we're getting this back on track for middle-class New Mexicans.
Okay, thank you, David. Matt?
Thank you, both of you, David and Fred, for this forum. This is really an exciting opportunity to let New Mexicans know who I am and where I stand. I think that I bring a new voice to politics coming out of New Mexico for a couple of reasons. I have not planned on being a politician. This is not something that I spent the beginning of my life planning to do. I became a historian and got my PhD in history so that I could then teach history at the college level, which is what I've done. And before that, in order to be able to do that, I was in the military. I was in the Coast Guard so that I could be able to go to college. And so these experiences for me, having been in the military, and now being a veteran, gives me a unique perspective that is needed in our government right now as far as when we're looking at international events now and the possibility of maybe going to war. It's good to have that point of view. And also, I have raised a family. I've educated myself. I've come from a whole different perspective, and I can bring all of these things to as a new voice to Congress.
Okay, Mad, we'll begin with you on this second question. What would be your number one legislative priority and why?
Okay, I guess this is the first thing that I was planning on doing. The first thing I want to do is tackle DACA and have a path to citizenship for our dreamers. And I feel the need to do that here, specifically for New Mexico, because we have a lot of people in this state who are living in the shadows. And in a lot of cases, our dreamers come here to this state and to America, and they don't know that they are that they're not American citizens until they go and get their driver's license or they try to apply for college. And so these kids need to be brought out of the shadows, and they need to be able to contribute as they are already contributing. And in doing that, what I want to do is make a partnership between the federal government and states through the school system so that when these kids finish high school or finish college, they will walk across the stage having taken the classes, political science classes, history classes, English language classes, and they will, in one hand, they will get their diploma, and in the other hand, they're going to get their citizenship.
Okay, thank you, Mad. David, your number one legislative priority should you be elected to Congress?
Well, I think that I would agree with Mad that passing a Clean Dream Act is a utmost importance for our district. I grew up on the border, surrounded by immigrant families. These people are as American as you or I. They're some of our best and our brightest. We're going to all lose out if they're not allowed to stay here. So it's not just a matter of taking their interest into consideration. It's our society. Beyond that, I think that I would like to establish some really good constituent services, because I think that's a part of the job of a congressperson that's not always taken into consideration. But a lot of times because you're going to be 1 in 435 in the House of Representatives, but you can be the single advocate for veterans who need help with their disability claims, for people who need help with Social Security claims, for immigrants who are at risk of deportation. They can come to the congressperson, they can come to your office, and you can help them deal with those issues. And so I would like to set that up on day one, offices in every city in our district, so that we can get New Mexicans the help they need dealing with the federal government, especially people like dreamers, mothers and fathers who've lived here for decades who are at risk of deportation, because that is really hurting our community, and it's something I think we really need to address.
Okay. David, as you know, Republicans have had an almost absolute hold on the U.S. House seat in the 2nd District going back to 1980. Once again this year, GOP primary candidates are raising a lot more money than Democrats. If you are the general election candidate, what is your strategy to overcome this challenge?
Well, I think it's something we all need to be thinking about. I think one thing we can do is just really draw attention to the issues that Republicans have failed Middle America on, have failed our communities. This tax bill, Republicans just voted to raise middle-class taxes and to cut our health care. We need to be saying that over and over and over again so that people realize the situation that Republicans are voting for. They're looking out for their interests of their donors. They're looking out for the interest of massive multinational corporations. They're not looking out for the people of New Mexico. So that's one thing. We need to make sure that we're talking about the issues that affect people's pocketbooks. The second thing, we need to be mobilizing people. We need to have voter registration. There are actually more registered Democrats in this district than registered Republicans, and there's over 100,000 unregistered people who are eligible to vote. If we were getting all of the voices of New Mexicans to the table, I think people would be voting for a strong middle-class agenda. Investment in education, investment in healthcare, strengthening Social Security. I think that's what New Mexicans want. And so part of it is building a good organization, raising the money, but part of it's also speaking about issues that people can relate to. And so that's what I intend to do.
Matt, your thoughts on this issue of the Republican lock on the 2nd District and what is likely to be a very large gap in terms of fundraising?
What happens consistently here in this district is, as you said, it does seem that that Republicans have a grip on this district, and that's because this district isn't just the cities that go up and down the Rio Grande where we see our progressives and our Democrats, but there are Democrats that live on both sides too, in the countryside. We have Democrats who are ranchers. We have Democrats who work out in Hobbs in the fields. We have Democrats in all of these other locations, and I think they feel somewhat left out. And the thing about me is I'm working with a grassroots campaign. For me, everything is about the grassroots. This is not about me. This is about the people out, in southern New Mexico. And so what I want people to realize is that I came from a farm and a ranch. I came from the military. So veterans is a significant number of veterans in this district that will find a helping hand, and that and this isn't my campaign, this is their campaign. Let's just put it that way. This is not my campaign. This is Southern New Mexico's campaign.
Okay. Mad, what is your favorite thing, and I know that's hard, just one
Right.
thing, but what's your favorite thing about New Mexico, and what are you going to do to preserve it?
I came to New Mexico because of its wildlands. As I was growing up, I spent a lot of time on open range with just me and with my horse. And sometimes with my brother and his horse, but mostly me and my horse. And so when I came to New Mexico, that's what it was for. You know, you drive through Texas and everything is owned. You get to New Mexico and it's wide open beauty. And so these days my husband and I like to hike and camp in our wild lands. And so for me, protecting that is really premier. It's very important to me that our public lands and our wild spaces remain that way. And what I would like to do is to strengthen our Antiquities Act and to strengthen our wildlife acts and everything, you know, the things that keep our lands safe. And that would be one of those things that need to be done in Congress.
Okay. David, for you, your favorite thing about New Mexico and what you're going to do to preserve it?
Well, I would have to agree with Mad that our public lands are a tremendous asset for our state. And this is something that there's a real contrast between the Republicans and the Democrats. Steve Pierce was opposed to the designation of the Organ Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument. The Republicans that are currently running for this seat, many of them are in favor of selling off a lot of our public lands, opening them up to more exploitation. I have a deep love of our public lands. You know, my parents took me hiking in the Organ Mountains before I was old enough to walk. I was baptized in the Gila River by my grandpa, who's a Presbyterian minister. And so absolutely preserving these great resources, it's not only is it good for our quality of life, it's great for our economy. Tourism is one of our 3 largest industries, and people come here to see white sands. They come here for Carlsbad Caverns. They come here for the Organ Mountains. If you go out hiking in the Organ Mountains, you're definitely going to see someone who came from out of state. And so in terms of specific things that I like to do to protect our public lands, the Gila River is a big thing for me. I would like to introduce on my very first day in Congress legislation to make that a wild and scenic river, and to amend the Arizona Water Settlement Act, which actually put aside $128 million for New Mexico to divert it. I think that money we should keep that money and we should divert it all to water conservation efforts, because the people of our area don't want to see that treasure diverted, and there's other ways that we can increase our water supply.
All right, David, we'll start with you now on this question, and it's one I'm very interested in the answer to from both of you, because it reflects something that we have to learn in journalism too. So what are you hearing from people on the campaign trail is the single biggest challenge facing New Mexico, and what are you going to do to address it?
Well, I think one thing that people are extremely concerned about is healthcare, and especially now with the Senate tax bill, which actually includes a repeal of the individual mandate, which is going to completely undermine the Affordable Care Act. Donald Trump has also come in and, through an executive order, repealed some of the subsidies that allowed people to get access. So healthcare is a tremendous concern for so many New Mexicans. And there's so many issues that are wrapped up in that too. The opioid epidemic kills 500 people in New Mexico every year. And one of the biggest problems is that people don't have coverage. They can't get treatment for the mental health issues that lead them down that path. And so I am going to be fighting for universal coverage for New Mexicans, because I think healthcare just is such an essential part of our economy, and it's a right. Everyone has a right to healthcare, and the fact that so many people are concerned about whether they can actually get the care they need is very worrisome.
Okay. Mad, the people you're talking to, what they say is the single biggest challenge, and what you do to address it if you're elected.
Right. So as I travel this district, I see a lot of people. They're talking about a lot of things. We hear about taxes. We hear about healthcare. We hear about a lot of different things, the economy, but the single thing that I hear in every single neighborhood and from every, just all around this district is the opioid epidemic and resultant crime. And when I look at this, and I've talked to a number of people, a number of sheriffs and police chiefs, and what I am seeing is that there are programs that are in place, but our rural and small communities cannot access these programs. So for instance, there's the high incidence drug trafficking area program, which is federally funded. So if for a sheriff to go into a neighborhood and make a drug buy, they have to use federal money. But they cannot qualify for this unless they have an officer who is dedicated to that position. So I would like to see some of these things rewritten so that in this incident, in this case, the federal government should then help to supply that officer. And this would make a big difference in towns like my own in Socorro, where we have identified 50 drug dealers that they cannot go after.
Okay. Mad, we'll begin with you on this one. Both of you support universal health care. Mad, how should the country achieve this and pay for it?
Okay, so this is really an important topic because yes, I do believe in a universal health care. I think that it's a human right. What has happened with this tax debacle that we're looking at right now is when we're talking about how we're going to fund something, a lot of the things, when you're looking at a program, even if you look at Bernie Sanders' program, a lot of things are dealt with where is the money coming from via taxes. Well, right now we don't know what taxes, what money we're even going to have next, in 2 years. So when we look at this, we do need it. We do need to roll it out incrementally so that we will just say expanding Medicare, a little bit at a time, expanding Medicare. I do like the idea of seeing premiums that are income-based. And again, coming from Bernie Sanders, I think it's 6.2% premium that a business would pay, and then 2.2% that the individual would pay. And I think that this is a good beginning. And also keeping in mind that what we're looking at when we're looking at healthcare is right now people who are ill go to very ill are going to the hospital, but because they're underinsured or uninsured. And later, once this rolls out, they won't be ill, they'll be just taken care of as more a well health checkup.
Okay, David, same question for you. Universal health care, how should the country achieve it and then pay for it?
Well, I'm open-minded on this issue. I think that there are, if you look at other countries around the world, there are a variety of different models that have worked. But the number one thing we need to do is we need to have real middle-class tax reform. What we're having right now, they're going to raise our taxes and cut our health care. It's going to be a disaster for the middle class. There is money that is there that we could be, we're the richest country in the world. We can afford to provide health care to all of our people. I wrote an article in the Albuquerque Journal that explained why Mark Zuckerberg, this was before the tax bill, would never have to pay federal income tax again because of a massive loophole that benefits the investment class. This is something I've talked about on the campaign trail many times, that people in the investment class generally do not pay taxes, even before this latest bill. So there is money to pay for expanding Medicaid, for expanding Medicare, for whatever strategy. And I'm not against having the private market for certain people if it's regulated to ensure that the plans are provide essential benefits and so forth. But what we're seeing with the Trump administration is the exact opposite direction. The healthcare bill is, the tax bill will actually trigger cuts to Medicare and Medicaid, and that is going to hurt people in this district. 44% of New Mexicans rely on Medicaid for their insurance. So we already have a tremendous government role in healthcare in this state, and we're going to be hurting if they cut it.
Okay. Next question, we begin with you on this one, David. let's talk about Social Security. Without changes, there is a massive shortfall in order to maintain current benefits that is going to occur in the future. But critics of the current system say that this is completely unnecessary if the earnings cap on the Social Security tax is removed. Do you support that removal, yes or no, and why? And if the answer is no, how would you fix Social Security?
Well, I think you raise a very important question. I'm a strong advocate for Social Security, and I think we need to lift the income threshold. What happens right now is that you only pay Social Security on your first $120,000 of wages, and after that you pay nothing. And you don't pay at all based on investment income. We actually, for Medicare, we actually don't have a earnings cap, and we do tax investment income. So if we funded Social Security the way we fund Medicare, we would not. This program would be robust and stable, and it is so crucial for so many New Mexicans that rely on this program, and it lifts people out of poverty. It makes sure that they are able to live with dignity throughout their lives. So I've written on this subject. I think we can actually expand Social Security. I think the money is there. Again, there are so many things where it's not a question of do we have the money, it's a question of what are our priorities. This is the richest country on earth. We can afford to invest in our people. Right now, the Republicans are not wanting to do that. In fact, they're cutting taxes for the very wealthy just for the purpose of cutting our benefits, because they are ideologically opposed to the idea of the government as providing a safety net. This is it's a ideological choice. It's not something that's mandated by economics at all.
Okay, Mad, very specific question, so I'll repeat it. Do you support removing that earnings cap that we have right now on the Social Security tax, yes or no, and why? And if the answer is no, how would you fix Social Security?
I think that we should remove that earnings cap. There is no reason why somebody who's making, $1 million a year should not be paying into it. They may not need it, which is of course why they don't want to pay it, but they're a part of this community as well, this community called America. And we're founded on a tenet of American citizens care about and need to take care of other American citizens. This is one of the founding principles of our country, that we are a country that is governed by and for Americans, for our citizens. And by doing this, by removing that cap, we will be then ensuring that the woman that lives next door is not eating tinned cat food. I mean, there have been horror stories about this in the past. This is why we have this, is so that our elderly population is not making a decision between electricity and food. That we need to be able to continue to do that. And I also believe that we have to begin to pay back, to repay Social Security from the money that has been borrowed from it in the past.
Okay. Mad, name 2 specific actions we can take to reduce gun violence in America.
Okay. So this is a really important one, and the Second Amendment has been upheld pretty well by the Supreme Court. So nobody is taking anybody's guns. That's just not something that's on the table right now. And I'm a gun owner myself. This is just, so we have to look beyond that. But that does not mean that we cannot talk, that we should be able to talk to both sides and have common sense discussions. And in order to deal with gun violence, the first thing that we need to do is close the loopholes. Okay, if you're going to have private sales of weapons, there is absolutely no reason why you cannot use a licensed gun store, gun shop as an agent to help effect that sale. And we also need to close the loopholes in the gun shows. But second to that is that there are some things like bump stock and silencers that we need to actually make these things impossible for it, because there's only one thing, there's only one reason for either of these, and that is to kill people. And you will hear other hunters, sometimes every now and again, somebody that says, well, I need a silencer to hunt. My response to that is, if you need a silencer to silence that first shot, then maybe you shouldn't be hunting.
Okay, David, 2 specific actions we can take to reduce gun violence in America.
I think this is an incredibly important question. I mean, we have a gun violence epidemic in this country that kills 30,000 Americans every year. This is next to the opioid epidemic. This is probably the largest contributor to untimely deaths in our country. And I support the Second Amendment. I studied constitutional law, and I am a strong supporter of the Constitution. I do think the Second Amendment, it talks about the need for a well-regulated militia. It talks about regulation in the text of that amendment. And so I think that things like common sense background checks are well within the what is contemplated by the Second Amendment. And the most important thing is we need to be looking for solutions. I think that Americans are sick and tired of seeing this tragic violence, and then Congress responding with this hackneyed expression of, we're going to have, sending our thoughts and prayers. Well, I don't have all the answers to solving the gun violence epidemic, but doing nothing is not a solution. If Donald Trump said, oh, this is not a gun issue, this is a mental health issue, well, then he needs to be putting forth a plan for expanding mental health care. And in fact, what he's doing is actually hurting people's access to that. So I think we need to treat this as an emergency. We need to be, I support closing the gun show loophole. I support banning gun stocks. I think people on the terrorist watch list should not be able to obtain firearms. And I think we need to expand access to mental health care. I think that's crucial.
Okay, we're talking with David Baake and Mad Hildebrandt, both running in the Democratic primary in New Mexico's 2nd Congressional District. And we thank all of you who sent us a great list of questions for this program. It was tough to whittle down the list. I had many more submissions than we're going to get to in an hour. David, we start with you on the next one. Name the social justice issue about which you feel most passionately, and explain how you would address it in Congress.
Well, this is a really interesting question. We touched a little bit on Dreamers earlier, and this is something that is extremely important to me. I mean, I grew up 2 miles from the U.S.-Mexico border, surrounded by immigrants, and just have really been shaped by that to really appreciate what immigrants bring to this country. I think we need comprehensive immigration reform. We need to take emergency action right now to protect our dreamers and to end the deportation of mothers and fathers who have been here for decades and have no significant criminal history. We've been seeing that here in Las Cruces. We had a woman, Francia Elena Benitez Castaño, who had been here for over 20 years, a small business owner, completely law-abiding, who was deported recently. This is just completely unconscionable. So we need to stop in mass deportation. We need to have comprehensive immigration reform that makes it easier for people to come here we can do do a background check to see if people are coming here. But right now it's completely broken. There's no actual legal pathway, which is why so many people come here illegally. And I think immigrants just contribute a tremendous amount to our society, and look forward to fighting for our immigrant communities.
Okay, Mad, same question for you. The social justice issue about which you feel most passionately, and explain how you would address it in Congress.
Okay, this is another one of those issues. We did talk about the Dreamers, and so I'm going to take a different step here, and that is the #MeToo movement that is happening right now. I think is an incredibly important thing, that women are coming forward. And in the past, if you were, in your job site, if you were a woman, you did not tell anyone if something happened to you. You just didn't do it, because if you did, you might lose your job, or you are going to be facing ostracism, or maybe just more bullying and teasing from the people that you're trying to get away from. This is what happens for women, and it has happened. So I'm seeing this Me Too movement as a very important thing. when you look at what's happening in Alabama, I think it is really shocking that President Trump and Republicans, the RNC, would now go forward. Even with the Me Too thing happening, they're going to go and say, we'll give Roy more money. And this is not an acceptable thing to me, and I think that we do need to just support the women as people are coming forward.
Okay. Med, how would you change federal policy affecting K-12 education, if at all?
Okay, I think that when you're looking at K through 12 education, we do have a D grade by and large in New Mexico. And there is, I think one of the primary ways to fix this begins with preschool. And so I am a supporter of the Childcare for Working Parents Act, which was just presented in September. And what this does is that one of the things that it does is that it provides incentives to states so that they will provide preschool or pre-K for 3 or 4-year-olds so that they can be reached early. And I think this is one way that we could really reach young children to help them enjoy school more and be more prepared by the time they begin kindergarten. I also think that we need to have an end to lunch shaming, which is happening here in New Mexico. We're a leader in that area, thanks to Michael Padilla, Senator Michael Padilla, who has championed this in New Mexico, because a hungry child is a child who is not going to do well in school. And then the final thing that I think would be important, and what I will do, is I would like to have an education summit every year in which I will reach out into the educators themselves and have them tell us what is important and what they need. Right.
Okay. David, your thoughts on K-12 education. How would you change federal policy on K-12, if at all?
Well, this is a really important question to me. My mother was a public school teacher for 35 years. I went to public schools my whole life. And I think that federal policy has gotten too obsessed with this notion of testing. And I've met with Dr. Ewing, who's the superintendent here. I've met with, I think, all of the members of the Las Cruces School Board. I've met with many teachers. And what we're seeing is that this focus on testing is, it's actually preventing teachers from inspiring in their children a love of learning, of feeding on their curiosity. It's instead making school into too mechanical of a process, and it's actually, you're not teaching kids critical thinking skills. So that was all triggered by federal policy. So the thing is, obviously, education policy is largely at the state level, but at the federal level, I think we need to de-emphasize testing. We need to be making sure that education is funded fairly across zip codes. Too often, because school districts are funded by local property taxes, you have an enormous differential between how much each district earns per student because of the difference in the property taxes. So I would support investment to level the playing field, make sure we have strong public schools in every zip code. I also support early childhood education. I think that's critical. And then post K through 12, we need apprenticeship programs, we need community college. These are things we can invest in. So I would strongly support all of those options.
Okay, David, how would you change federal policy affecting higher education, if at all?
Oh, well, great. Go right back into this answer. So I do think that we can drastically lower the cost of higher education with the right investments, and it's not unachievable. This tax bill the Republicans just passed put us into debt $1.5 trillion if it passes and is signed by Donald Trump. For a third of that price, we could have had a free public university for all of the students in the United States. So I definitely think we need to have free community college. I think that in our modern economy, that is just it's essential that you have something beyond just K through 12. And I think that looking at increased subsidies for K through 12, for public university would be a very good idea as well. I think apprenticeship programs are also important. College isn't for everyone, and you shouldn't have to obtain an advanced degree to succeed in the United States. So I actually have an idea for what's called a climate conservation course. So it would be putting people to work on young people, returning veterans, unemployed people, to work on energy efficiency projects, because energy efficiency could save the United States consumers $650 billion. So it would actually pay for itself. It would be a way to get people trained for these new skills that they need to succeed in the new economy. And I think it'd be great all the way around.
Okay, Mad, your thoughts, changing federal policy affecting higher education, if at all?
So I teach at the community college level. That is where the bulk of my students come from, and a lot of them are veterans or are in the military. And so what I would like to see is free community college across the board. I think that that's where we need to be. Our economic system requires an education level now that is attainable through community colleges and through having apprenticeship programs, through having vocational technical education. I think we should see vocational technical education also in the high schools, but definitely in the college level. And I would like to see that reach across, perhaps into the unions even, so that education is not just something that you're getting in college, but that you're getting an education that is helping you to lead towards a job that is attainable for you. And I would like to see also student loans need to be forgiven through public works programs. I would really like to see that continue. I think we're about to lose that, and that needs to be achievable, particularly for people who are in the police department and education, certain areas.
Okay. We move on to a topic I know both of you are very passionate about, our federal lands. Mad, we begin with you on this. The Trump administration has advocated for policies to increase oil and gas production on these lands. What is your position and why?
I think this one is one of those mixed questions. I think that there are areas of public lands that could have production on them. When it is a monument, I think that, or certain areas, when you're talking about an area that is set aside because of its cultural significance, whether it's to the native population for religious reasons, or because of just the history that has taken place on an area, or the natural beauty, you can't destroy those. You cannot destroy those. But there are also open space lands or various other categories of lands, and those are the lands that perhaps you would be able to see more of the mining. I know my dad he liked to go out and gold mine when I was growing up, and he had several claims. So there are some things that you cannot just end, just offhand. But there are certain categories that I think are pretty well sacrosanct, and our monuments should be sacrosanct.
Okay, David, your thoughts on this? As you know, the Trump administration is advocating for policies to increase oil and gas production on federal lands. What's your position and why?
Well, I think this is a very interesting question, and I would say, I agree with Mad that there are certain levels that are absolutely off limits for any sort of activity or national parks or national monuments. I'm not against some economic exploitation of some of our public lands where it makes sense. But what I think is very concerning about this administration is that they are stacking the deck in favor of fossil fuels against clean energy. This tax bill actually includes a repeal of certain clean energy incentives, even though the tax code actually includes many loopholes that benefit fossil fuel extraction, and those are not touched. And we're seeing the same thing in the public land sphere, where they're not moving forward with expediting clean energy projects. And that really is the future of our economy here in southern New Mexico. We should be the national leader in clean energy. We have year-round sun, we have abundant wind, we have geothermal, and that is going to be leading us to a lot of economic growth. In Los Lunas, I'll give you an example. Facebook recently announced that they were going to double the size of their data center there. And the reason they did this is they have a corporate policy of using 100% clean energy to power their data centers. And they were able to secure that in Albuquerque. And so this move toward, the fact that they're putting a brake on clean energy policies is actually very bad for our economy, because not only does clean energy create jobs directly, it will help us attract other businesses to our region, which we desperately need.
Okay, thank you. We continue now with an additional question on our federal lands. David, we'll start with you on this one. Many people, including federal officials, have expressed grave concern about funding for our national parks and monuments, saying in some cases very basic maintenance is being ignored. What is your position on this issue?
I think that is, from my personal experience out hiking and experiencing these monuments and these parks, I do see that. And this is just a matter of funding. Congress could easily appropriate the necessary funding. There is a proposal on the table from Secretary Zinke to raise the price of admission for places like the Grand Canyon, Zion National Park to $75 per family. I strongly oppose that. Our national parks are treasures that belong to all Americans. They can't be just playgrounds for the rich. And so I think that there's no reason. I mean, this is pennies. This is not a significant amount of money. There's no reason why we shouldn't be funding our parks, as well as other aspects of our Department of Interior, the BLM. We should be funding the Forest Service so they can adequately manage our public lands and protect them for future generations.
Okay, your thoughts on this, the funding for our national parks and monuments. As I mentioned, some are raising a real alarm that even basic maintenance in some cases is being ignored. What's your position on the issue?
It's very clear that with the rise in this idea of raising the rates to let people come in for $75 a carload or a person is ridiculous. And so I think that the alarm that is being raised is alarmist more than anything else. People use the parks. If the prices go up, people are not going to be able to use those parks, and that is going to give Secretary Zinke and Donald Trump a reason to be able to say, look, nobody's using this park, let's close the park. This is my idea, my image. This is what I see happening. We do have some crumbling infrastructure, of course we do. Those things do need to be addressed, but people like to do these things. So when you have a trail that needs to be fixed, people come in and do it. Sierra Club, people come. We come to fix infrastructure. And so I think that just opening that up to the public, come and fix our park. People are going to do that. We've done that just recently in Socorro.
Okay. Mad, we'll start with you on this one. How would you gain congressional support for economic development along the border?
So this is an interesting question, that when we're looking at the border, what we're having to deal with is the idea that the other side of the aisle wants to just put up a wall and doesn't want, I guess, economic development along that border. We need to put together a program that works on both sides of that border, that projects that work together between us and Mexico. And I think it's a question that would be really hard to deal with in Washington, D.C. with the other side of the aisle, and I think that we just have to talk about how well it will benefit our state and the country.
Okay, David, your thoughts on this, how you'd gain congressional support for economic development along the border?
Well, this is a very interesting question. And I think our trade with Mexico is one of the biggest bright spots in our economy here in southern New Mexico. The Santa Teresa port of entry has been a huge boon. It supports 2,500 American jobs. They produce, on the Mexico side, 55,000 laptops a day. And our exports to Mexico have increased 370% since 2007. So what we need is to go into Congress and to explain, to lay out this case of how this is really benefiting our economy. It's benefiting consumers because we have these cheap goods coming across. It's benefiting our businesses because they're able to export. And this is one way we can really help change the narrative, I think, in Washington, that the border is, an area that is scary, and that we need to be protecting ourselves from Mexico. We know, people who grew up in the borderlands, who know this area, know that that is not the case, that we have a lot to benefit from our partners in Mexico. And there are issues in any relationship between nations that need to be addressed. But I strongly support making the Santa Teresa port of entry the most efficient entry point in the entire border. I think we can do that by expanding hours, by increasing the pre-clearance program that they have, where they have customs agents on the Mexico side looking at the packages before they go across. So that is something that we can really do to boost our economy.
Okay, David, we'll start with you on this one, and it's related to both of your answers on the last question. What is your position on border security and the expansion of the border wall?
I think that when I've talked to people in these border communities, when I've met with the mayor of Sunland Park and Border Patrol agents and folks like that, there's widespread consensus that the border wall is not the best way to address this issue. There's high-tech options that are out there. There are, you have your agents that are already there. Really, we need to be cooperating with Mexico on this issue, and I think part of how we do that is by working with them on things like trade. If we are increasing trade, we're having economic benefits, then they will be able to have, first of all, they'll have fewer people that are wanting to come here in the first place if their economy grows. And second, they'll have the resources to invest in security on their side and to deal with the drug violence, deal with the cartels. So I see us as needing to have a partnership with Mexico, with the state, the Chihuahua government, with the local governments as well. I don't think that a wall is going to solve anything. It will be a massive waste of money, I think. And it's just a really ugly signal to send to a country that we really should be seeing as a partner in economic development, and not as an enemy.
Okay, Mad, your position on border security and the expansion of the border wall.
We already have a fence. We already have a wall. We have border security. I think that building a different wall makes no sense, because there are areas that you can't build a wall in anyway, just because it's too rugged. So what we really need to look at is creating an arrangement between both sides, between us and Mexico, in which we actually have perhaps more visas, more agreements to allow people to come back and forth and work on the economy with Mexico, so that people don't have a reason to feel that they need to cross that border. But the thing about the border security is that what we have to deal with border security is not who's coming across the border in the first place. It is making sure that drugs aren't coming over, and making sure that we are watching for terrorists. So these are the two things that we're watching over that border. And we're seeing that drones are bringing drugs, so we're not even talking, a wall isn't going to stop that. But second to that, one of the things that people forget is that our coastlines are also our border. And so we hear all this stuff about the border between us and Mexico. We hear nothing about the Coast Guard and our coasts, and we need to also fund that to protect, to protect ourselves from that border, from drugs that come over, and also to rescue people.
Okay, Mad, what would comprehensive immigration reform look like if you designed it?
The first thing, again, as we've talked about before, is I would look at something for our dreamers. Okay, that is part of our immigration reform. For the past 200 years, we have always had people that come here, and then we have to have an amnesty, and then we move on. And then this is a continuing pattern that has gone throughout our history. Republicans, the other side of the aisle, will tell us that this is failure. I say that this is not failure. This is exactly what we've been doing for all this time, and we're still here, and it's been successful. So it's something that we can continue to do. I think that we do have to have visas, temporary visas for agricultural workers, and also for high-tech, highly skilled workers like scientists and engineers. Those things would be helpful. One of the things that when we're talking about something like the border wall, we're talking about people who are coming that our assumption is that the people that are coming across this border are coming here to be in some illegal fashion. This isn't where we have our undocumented immigrants. Our undocumented immigrants are coming legally, and they're overstaying their visas.
Okay. David, your thoughts on this comprehensive immigration reform. What would it look like if you designed it?
That's a really interesting question. It's one that I've given a lot of thought to. I'm really proud of our nation's history as a beacon of liberty that welcomes people from all over the world. And I think we need to, as Democrats, need to embrace that and say this is a quintessential American value, that we are a welcoming country, that we take people from all over the world, that, to quote the Statue of Liberty, we take the world's poor, huddled masses. And we can continue to do that while still investing in our people. I don't think there's any conflict. So I think that there are, the first issue that you need to address in comprehensive immigration reform is the 14 million undocumented people who are already here. I think if people have been law-abiding, which immigrants actually commit crimes at a lower rate than people who are native citizens. So that's the vast majority of them. People who are law-abiding, who have developed ties to their community, who have been here a long time, should have a pathway to become permanent citizens. Beyond that, we need to streamline the legal immigration process. It shouldn't, right now it can take 10 to 20 to 30 years, even if you have a family member, if you're coming from certain countries, and if you don't have a family member, there's no path. I think that we should streamline that. We should not be turning our back on refugees. This is fundamental to who we are, and I do think that there can be compromises on issues of security, making sure that people who are a threat to our country should not be coming and should not be here. But ultimately, the biggest thing that we need to do is address the people who are already here, making sure that they're not ripped out of their communities that they've been contributing to.
David, some say that closed primaries and superdelegates create barriers to true representation by citizens. Valid means of increasing voter participation include automatic registration for 18-year-olds and same-day registration. What methods do you support, if any, for increasing access to the vote?
I think this is a very important question. I think that we need to begin with reinstating the Voting Rights Act. This was very key provision of this was struck down by the Supreme Court, and it has led to a lot of voter suppression efforts. It's extremely troubling. I think that making Election Day a national holiday is a great idea. I think automatic registration is a good idea, but we need to make sure that there's polling places in every community, including rural communities, including every part of our state. And because that is a problem that we've seen all over the country is people being disenfranchised effectively disenfranchised by the fact that they have one polling place for a tremendous number of people, and they have to wait in lines for a very long time. And so I think we really need to get to work on restoring the Voting Rights Act, and that would be one of my first priorities in that area.
Okay. Mad, your thoughts, methods that you would support, if any, for increasing access to the vote?
I think that it's important that people have an easy way to register to vote, which we can register people to vote. We go out and we find people. And someone who goes in to get a driver's license, they can register to vote. But then we hear this thing about, do you have a picture ID? And I think one of the simplest ways to fix this is the person should be able to register to vote on the internet, just to begin with. It's just at home. And then when they come into the polling place, what happens with the picture ID? Okay, it has to be a government issued ID. People who are disadvantaged have their food stamp or WIC IDs. Those things should have photos on them. Simple. Put their photo on them and let them go in there, and here's your government ID. And then they will have access to the vote just that easily. Because it's the photo ID is the one that we keep hearing. And then we should not be disenfranchising people because they moved, possibly. We shouldn't be pulling people off of the rolls just because they're a student in this school and they're not at home where they've sent a letter to them. And this happened to my son. He was disenfranchised when he was in Alabama, luckily not here, but because he had just moved from one side of the campus to the other.
Okay.
And this sort of thing should not happen.
Mad Hildebrandt and David Baake, they are both running for the Democratic nomination in New Mexico's 2nd Congressional District. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us as we continue the dialogue moving toward June and the primary.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We have invited the Republican primary candidates as well and hope to bring you a conversation with them on KRWG. And that was fitting that was the last question. We do not have same-day registration in New Mexico. So if you intend to vote in the primary, you should register right now. If you are not registered to vote, we also do not have an open primary in New Mexico. We have a closed primary. So in order to vote in a primary election, you must be registered with a party, and that is something that you can do right now. If you have a state ID, you can actually do it online, and you'll find a link on our homepage at krwg.org. If you don't have a state ID, you can go to your clerk's office and register to vote, and then vote in every election. It's one of the few things that I can ask folks to do, that I can advocate for. We're proud to do it, and we're proud to continue forums like this. It's only possible with your support, and we thank you so much for being a member of KRWG. I'm Fred Martino. Have a great week.